perhaps, there are these subconscious biases and perceptions that, technical topics are more for boys than for girls. There could be a perception like that, in the society that we catch on to. So I think it's important to make people aware that that's not true.
You're now listening to Season 2 of Spark After Hours, where we sit down to chat with STEM professionals every Saturday. If you like the episode, consider following us on Spotify and Instagram at Spark Hacks. We hope you enjoy. Welcome back to Spark After Hours, everyone. My name is Utej.
And my name is Mohit, and we'll be your host for today. For those that haven't been following us for a while, Spark is a youth-led nonprofit organization founded in 2018 to engage students in the world of science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. Over the pandemic, we have hosted a 36-hour online hackathon called Spark from Home, and a virtual case competition this summer called Chase a Case.
Here with us, we have Nimita Wadhwa, a graduate from the University of Waterloo in computer engineering, who later obtained her Master's of Engineering in Aerospace Engineering from Cornell University. And she's currently working as a spacecraft engineer for the Canadian Space Agency. Even when I say it, it sounds unbelievable. It's so great to have you here today, Nimita.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so before we get started, would you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I work as a spacecraft engineer in satellite operations at the Canadian Space Agency. I worked on various spacecraft projects. I've also worked on the Canadarm2 for some time in the past. But currently, the main project I'm working on is the RadarSat Constellation mission. It got launched in 2019 from California on the SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket. It's a constellation of 3 satellites that takes radar images of the Earth. And I have been on this project since before its launch, doing its assembly, integration, and testing. And now I'm working on its operations. So, we operate the spacecraft as a spacecraft engineer. It's like a systems engineer. You work on this, and the system itself is the spacecraft, right? So we respond to anomalies. We do anomaly resolutions. We do maintenance activities on the spacecraft. We do analyses of the telemetry data that we get, providing radar images of Earth, and other data to other government departments and beyond.
Wow, that's amazing. That's really good to hear about that. So many people today, right, are unaware of what the real impact is of the aerospace industry. So can you tell us a little bit about why your work's so important to us and how it impacts everyday people and their lives?
Sure. So the aerospace industry is pretty broad, right? So I can only speak to my space industry and what I do with the spacecrafts. So these images that, for example, this RadarSat Constellation mission that I'm working on, these images are used for disaster management. And remember, these are radar images. So these are not optical images. So it goes beyond the weather. Even if it's bad weather, we can still take images. We use it for disaster management, so we can look at the extent, duration, impact of floods, landslides, or earthquakes in Canada and around the world. So it leads to faster recovery operations on Earth. We do ship monitoring, ice monitoring, for example, for people navigating the north. The data also helps the northern communities. The data is also being used for ocean modeling. We do Arctic surveillance. We do daily Canadian visits and up to 4 times a day in the Arctic. And we have access to 90% of the world's surface. So this satellite is, helping Canadians, it's helping the world. It was just one example. And there are other satellites, like communication satellites or GPS satellites, who help everyone. There's a very cool page from the Canadian Space Agency website that we can link on, how satellites help people in their day-to-day lives, and they don't even realize. For example, these days when you're eating your bowl of cereal, satellites are helping us in agriculture. They're helping the farmers, get to know when to harvest, when to irrigate. So things like that. So it's really cool how satellites are actually there in our everyday lives right now.
Oh, wow. I learned a little bit about what you said during geography class in grade 9, but everything else was completely new to me. So thanks a lot for sharing that information. And one of the personal questions I had was, what was your motivation to join the CSA? And could you elaborate on that a bit?
Yeah, so, it was always my dream to work in space. I remember when I was a little child, maybe I was 6 years old or something, and my grandfather asked me, he said, "What do you want to do when you grow up?" And I said I wanted to be a space scientist. And I had no idea what scientist meant at that time, but I just knew that I wanted to do something in space. And as I was growing up, when I did my internships and co-ops in during my university years in different companies, I realized I really wanted to work in the public sector because I wanted to impact, my country, like Canada as a whole. And so Canadian Space Agency became like the dream destination for me. So I wanted to work at the CSA for the longest time.
Wow, it's really nice to have goals when you're younger, because then you can pursue them in the future and look up to those goals. So I definitely agree with that. And thank you for sharing for that. And one of the things that we were wondering is, what is your favorite project so far on the CSA?
So this is a very difficult question to answer because there are so many cool things going on at the CSA. There are projects that I'm not involved in, which are so cool as well. For example, we recently started this Gateway initiative. So NASA is working on this, lunar space station. And we're involved in it. CSA is involved in that. So it's basically a space station that's going to be orbiting the moon, So that's such a cool project at the CSA right now. However, I'm not involved in it currently. But there are other projects I worked on. For example, I worked on another mission, NEOSAT, which was looking for new inner solar system asteroids. So we were finding asteroids. It was a telescope satellite. So that was so cool. And I think the current project I'm working on, I really like it because, again, like I said, it impacts Canadians and people around the world. And the fact that we can do disaster management with the help of satellites, I think it's so cool. So, yeah.
Wow. So you mentioned looking through the telescope and then working with NASA as well. So is that always the case where you get to work with other agencies like space agencies, or is it only the CSA which you focus on primarily?
So it depends on the project you're involved in. Canadian Space Agency works with other agencies of the world, and we're involved on the International Space Station. We have a Canadian Space Station program. So, there are 5 agencies that work on the ISS, and CSA is one of them. And there are other projects that we're involved with NASA, like Gateway is one of them, like I mentioned. And also we work with the European Space Agency and, other agencies as well. So the project that I'm working on currently, RadarSat Constellation Mission, is a very Canadian project. And so that's our own project that we're working on.
And since you're working on that project, have you been able to personally look through the telescope and look at the constellations, or are there certain people in your team who are designated to do that job?
Well, so this is the telescope project that I talked about. It was a telescope on the satellite. So because I was a spacecraft engineer working on that satellite, I had access to the images, So there are astronomers, for example, who were in Canada who were requesting us to take these images. Like they would give us a target in the sky, for example, and they would say, okay, point your spacecraft. Could you point your spacecraft to that target? And then I would do the analysis of, can I point my spacecraft to that target? Because, I have to take care of the sun. I have to take care of where it is. Is the Earth in between, that target and my telescope, the satellite, So things like that, I would do the analysis. Okay, so yeah, so if it's a goal, like, okay, yeah, I can do that. So then I would command the satellite to point in that direction. And then we would take pictures, and then I would have access to the pictures so I can look at the pictures if I wanted to, but basically we were sending those pictures to our clients or the people who, were requesting those pictures.
Wow, that's really interesting. Thanks for sharing for that. Our next question for you is, have you been able to meet any notable figures so far in your life?
Sure. So I've met several astronauts and I've met several Canadian leaders at different events at work. But I've had some chance encounters that I thought were very interesting. So one time in the bathroom while washing my hands, I look over and there is Samantha Cristoforetti. She is the first woman astronaut of Italy. And so, I was started recognizing her. I was like, oh, are you Samantha? And she's like, yes. And then so she started talking, and she told me how she became the first woman astronaut in Italy. And so, it was a chance encounter, and it was so cool. And, she's so motivating, and she's such a trailblazer in her country, So she was, at the time, she was at the Canadian Space Agency to get trained on the Canada arms. So like most astronauts who go to the ISS will come to the space agency, Canadian Space Agency, to get trained on the Canada arms. So she was there for a few weeks for that. And then I've also met Chris Hadfield, and I happened to run into him in the elevator. So this was before his mission to space, which was the 6-month mission, where he was commanding the International Space Station. We just happened to take the elevator together. And so he started asking questions. He's like, who are you? Where do you work? And at the time I was a junior engineer at the agency. And so I was telling him what I do and what my goals are and things like that. He was very friendly. And then I told him, well, good luck on your mission, which was coming up very soon. I think it was in a few weeks or something, or a couple of months maybe. And then he goes into space, and he becomes one of the famous astronauts, in space. And then he came back to Earth after 6 months. And I remember he came to CSA to give a speech. And he, after the speech, people were going up to him to, congratulate him and take pictures with him and stuff like that. So I also went up to congratulate him. And then he remembered me. So I was like, wow, this is so cool that, he remembers that we had this elevator encounter, and he was asking me questions. And so he totally remembered me. And I thought that was so cool. Yeah.
Those encounters are crazy. The Chris Hadfield one, even the Italian astronaut. And even about your work, the impact you have is really nice to hear about. But now to backtrack a little bit, when you were first entering the aerospace industry, did you face any challenges, even challenges related to being a woman in STEM?
So, I did not particularly face challenges as such, but I know, gender disparity does exist in STEM fields. And I know people who have faced challenges, but I also think it's improving over the years. I think the government and the space agency, by extension, is doing a lot to help inequality and equity in the industry on their level. And there are programs, there are programs like Roberta Bondar STEM Career Development Program, which is an opportunity for women in STEM to network with the industry leaders. And I was actually part of this program in 2016, and where I met so many leaders. I actually met the Minister of Science, Kirsty Duncan. I met Prime Minister Trudeau, and I met Dr. Bondar, Roberta Bondar herself, and she's the first woman astronaut of Canada, right? So, and these people shared their stories with us. They, they really encouraged us, motivated us. So there are programs like these. So I see things changing. I'm very positive about the future, regarding this. And I also should mention, in terms of how I got to the CSA, for students who are, who want to pursue a career at the Canadian Space Agency, there is this junior engineer program. It's called the Eng2 engineering program. And I started my career at the Canadian Space Agency with this program. I remember there were about 1,000 applicants. It's a competitive program, and only the top 8 were selected. But it's totally worth it, because for the first 2 years at the Canadian Space Agency, we were trained. We were trained in different departments on different projects on different spacecrafts. So it's a very very useful, very it's a great program. And there are also a lot of internship programs, co-ops at the Canadian Space Agency. We hire students almost every semester. So I would encourage students and people who are interested to apply to the Canadian Space Agency.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And as you were saying earlier about even though you didn't face challenges yourself, you noticed all the disparity around you. And being in your position, like an actual woman working at the CSA, how do you plan on leveraging your position or your role and your credibility to maybe encourage more females to look into this field?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question, because sometimes you get so busy in your daily life and on your projects that you forget that you're actually in a position where you can leverage it to encourage young females or even other young people. And I think this podcast, for example, is definitely one of the ways I'm doing it. I hopefully I'm encouraging girls and women to get into STEM. And also I was part of the outreach program at the Canadian Space Agency, where we used to go to different places in Canada. I went to Yellowknife, Iqaluit, the northern areas, to basically talk to high school and university students, to encourage them, to show them, that this is one of the career paths that they could be on. So that was something I really enjoyed, and I hope to do that more. I hope to get more opportunities like that. So yeah, so that's a very good question, and yeah.
Yeah, and through your initiatives like this, have you been able to think about maybe what's the best way to actually get women into these STEM roles? Has it been education, awareness, or even something else?
I think there are multiple ways and multiple reasons why people get discouraged to get into these fields. Definitely more awareness is one thing. Like sometimes people are not aware of certain fields that exist, and also like I feel as women, perhaps there are these subconscious biases and perceptions that technical topics are more for boys than for girls. There could be a perception like that, in the society that we catch on to. So I think it's important for to make people aware that that's not true. And if you're interested, if you really have an interest in a particular field, you can do well in it. It doesn't matter what your background is or who you are. So so I think awareness and education both are very important in this regard.
And using education and awareness as your tools, do you think that maybe in the future of the STEM industries, including aerospace, do you see like a more equal playing field?
Well, for sure. Yeah, definitely. Like I was saying, I already see things changing. I see the government taking more and more initiatives. There are more and more programs, and not just the government. I mean, even the private industry is doing their best, to close the gap. So I think the future is very bright.
And just you've already given a bunch of advice throughout, but like as a like kind of like a closing to this topic, what advice would you give to aspiring women or young females or even students who want to pursue STEM fields, but they might feel a little bit hesitant to because of the stereotypes that you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, so I'm very happy to see more and more girls wanting a career in space and in STEM. One of the things I feel is to focus on your ambition and don't listen to the voices that tell you can't. Even if it's your own voice, because sometimes we go through some failures in life and we feel it brings us down. But it's not about not failing. It's about learning from your failures and getting up, right? So really just focus on your ambition, focus on what you want, and go for it, because anything is possible. And don't let the subconscious programs run behind the scene. So believe in yourself and go for it.
Honestly, that's really helpful advice to especially high school students right now, and especially those who are applying to university and have all the stress and everything with like academics, getting the marks. As like speaking from personal experience, it's just everything comes onto you because you have marks to maintain and everything. So advice like that really helps all of our audience members as well.
Yeah, and I think yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. Please go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, like, especially for high school kids, because high school students, because you're in a place where you have the world ahead of you. So I would say, like, define your goals, define your end goal. Like, where do you want to go? And then do research on what's needed at this point in your life. Like, what courses should you take next year? What program should you do in university? to get to where you want to go. So if you look at it in that way, like, okay, I'm going there and this is the path that I can follow. And sometimes there are multiple paths that lead to the same place. But if you select your path, do your research, find the right courses, find the right programs, take part in extracurricular activities that you could be doing. So that would really help. And overall, I think, to be positive, because anything is possible if you put your mind to it, right? So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And the best part about this conversation is that people can look up to you as well and see that you had a dream and then you followed through, and now look at where you're at the CSA, right? So just amazing to see how all these connections all come together. And that pretty much sums up our section for asking the general discussion questions. And now we're going to be moving on towards some fun trivia, fast answered questions. So the first one that I have for you is, what are your thoughts about living on Mars?
Thoughts about living on Mars? Oh my God, that would be so cool. That would be so cool. I think that's like the first step for humanity, isn't it? Like that's the closest planet to us. And I feel like Elon Musk is like really at it. Like he really wants to do it. So let's see what happens in the future. But I think it's just so cool. But it's technically it's a challenge. It's not like something super easy, so not even easy, so it'll be a challenge. It requires a lot of technical development, a lot of forethought, but there are a lot of forces on Earth right now that want this to happen. So I totally can see it happening, if not in the near future, maybe in a little further future, but I feel like it will eventually come to happen.
Yeah, seeing how Elon Musk is doing so much at the moment, handling so many different fields and sectors and technologies, I definitely agree with that. But could you give us an approximate, let's say, number of years for fun right now? Let's say 10 years.
I could not. I have no idea. All I know is in space projects, things get delayed a lot. So you have a target for 5 years, and it can even become 10 years. And that's because like when you go into outer space, you don't want to do things that are not tried and tested. You always want to focus on things that are the technology that already exists and is reliable and is tested. So you're not going to try something new in space, So this is why most of the time the space projects are delayed. And once the spacecraft is in space, there's not much you can do to repair it. There are only like software upgrades you can do, but you can't do a hardware. You can't change the hardware. So things like that. Like of course, like on the International Space Station, there are astronauts that we ship the hardware up and they change it, but it's only possible when there are people to do that, and it takes a lot of effort, fuel, money, cost, everything. So it's not easy. So I couldn't give you a date or anything like that, but we'll see, we'll see what happens.
Even though you couldn't give a time frame, that was like a super thoughtful and detailed answer. So maybe some of your predictions are right about the technical issues. I'm sure they are. But moving on to the next question then, do you think we humans are alone in the universe?
Honestly, considering how big the universe is, it doesn't make too much sense that we're alone, but then, is there more intelligent life than us? Questions like these are like, such an, they're so open-ended. But considering how big the universe is, with like trillions and trillions of stars, billions of galaxies, I mean, even our own Milky Way is so big. And now with the Kepler telescope, we're finding more and more Kepler spacecraft, we're finding more and more habitable planets that are in the Goldilocks zone, that can be habitable. So, I think our knowledge as humans is very little right now. And then again, you got to consider, what do you define as being life, because we have a very limited definition of what life is as well. So considering all that, I feel there has to be life outside of Earth. There just has to be. But will we find life outside of Earth during our lifetime? I don't know. I don't know how long it'll take. Will it take hundreds of years or thousands of years, or maybe in our lifetime? I don't know that.
Similar question to what was just asked. So I'm pretty sure you've seen movies and shows about, let's say, aliens and astronomy itself in general. And from those movies, you see the aliens that depicted, right? They have weird faces, like multiple eyes and everything. So this is kind of a stretch of a question, but do you think aliens actually look like that, or are those like completely ridiculous assumptions made by those casts?
Well, when you look at anything is possible, I mean, like there are sea creatures that look hideous, they're like deep sea creatures that look totally hideous. But, I was watching a Stephen Hawking's documentary on aliens, and they were basically trying to say that, universe has a certain, like there are there's carbon-based life, and there can be silicon-based life, perhaps. But based on the gravity of planets, depending on which planet you're on, your body has to be a certain size or weight, or, to be able to move around, So there's so many factors, like the way our shapes are and the structure is, it depends on, like how far are you from the sun? Like the further you go from the sun, maybe if there are beings that live in planets like those, they might have much bigger eyes, because they need to have more light come in to see, if optical is their thing, if they even see with eyes, and if they're on a planet that's huge, like Jupiter is, it's a gas giant really, but it still is massive and has more mass, then if there's a big planet like that, like, it'll have more gravity. So can you have, substances that are heavy, and can you have life like that on that planet? So there are questions like these that you can answer. You can look at how things are in the world, how things are in the universe, and what the structure of different planets and galaxies and everything is, how far from the sun, how close to the sun, etc. And you can have an idea of is this possible or not? But I don't know, I don't know the weird things they show in movies. I'm not sure if aliens like that exist. So.
Yeah, but I would still agree with you about the, anything is possible statement. Like, definitely, like, there's so many, Earth is just not it, right? There's so many other conditions on other, like, planets pretty much. So yeah. And on the topic of movies and TV shows as well, do you have a favorite space-related movie or TV show?
So I grew up watching Star Trek, right? Like many of us. I don't know about you guys, but my generation for sure. And so Star Trek was like my most famous, most favorite of TV shows. But I like the Next Generation more than the original. I have to say that. And I definitely like the Star Trek movies, the new movies on the original show. I love those. And I love the movie Interstellar. That's a cool movie, I think. But yeah.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of those names. I feel like it's up to date for our generation, so I think it'll.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And our final rapid fire question is, what's your favorite astronomer or astronaut? It could be any. You can go whichever way you want.
Ooh, this is difficult, huh? Because I would say Chris Hadfield. I'll go with the famous Canadian astronaut. Yeah, because I think he's done such cool stuff in space. Like he's, sung songs. He's really brought a space forefront, with his YouTube videos and with so what he's done is really cool. So I would say Chris Hadfield. Yeah.
I would say that's also a good answer since we talked about him in this podcast
right,
as
yeah.
well. So it worked out pretty well. And yeah, that pretty much goes, that pretty much solves our questions for discussion as well as a rapid fire. But the final thing that we want to ask you is, do you have any advice or final thoughts about how people right now, such as in high school or even the younger audience, of how they could actually go into the aerospace engineering field? Like, do you have any advice for them?
Yeah, so like I was saying, like if you want to get into aerospace or space field, you got to take the right courses starting in high school. So take all the math and science courses, get into engineering. Look at the engineering programs in universities across Canada. And personally, when I was going for my undergrad program, I did not look at, that I wanted to go in my own city. I was like looking at all of Canada and I was like, where's the best university? Where's the best program? And I want to go for that. So if you can be flexible like that, because, different provinces have different student loan programs as well. And especially University of Waterloo, where I was for my undergrad, we had good co-op programs. So we did like 6 co-ops, in different companies. So that helps pay off the student loans as well, and helps, with your fees and everything. So focus on what you want to study, take the courses accordingly. Don't worry so much about, oh, this is expensive or this is far away. I would say just forget about those things. If you really want to do something, it's always possible. And also, like I said, get into extracurricular activities. If there are programs in your high school that encourage, aerospace, if there are aerospace related themes, go for that. I don't know how old you have to be for a space camp these days, but hopefully when you're younger, you can go for space camps and, stuff like that. There's so much research available online these days. So do your research, look at the Canadian Space Agency website as well for programs, and see, what's available. And then once you're in university, try to get into doing co-ops or internships with Canadian Space Agency or with other private companies in aerospace. So yeah, that would be my advice.
Yeah, and that's truly amazing advice for the audience. So anyone listening who's interested in aerospace engineering, definitely take that to heart. And just to wrap things up, thank you so much, Nimita, for being here. Before we conclude, are there any other links you'd like to drop for our listeners, or any social media so they can learn more about you?
Yeah, so we have links, from the Canadian Space Agency website that I will forward. So one of the links, like I mentioned, was for about how satellites help people in their everyday lives. And there are links on even the RadarSat Constellation mission program that you can look up, who our clients are, how we're helping Canada. And also I will find the link for the Eng2 program, the junior engineer program that I talked about, which happens, they hire people, I believe, if not every year, then every couple of years or so, or they were doing that definitely before COVID. So I'm going to find out if they're still doing that. And I think that will be a really good program for people to apply to.
Well, I'll definitely be checking those links right after this episode. And I just want to say thanks again, Nimita. It was so great to hear about how things work at the CSA, your perspective as a woman in STEM, the funny encounters that you had on your during your job, and especially the amazing advice you provided for our audience about life and space, which is amazing. So yeah, that's all, folks, and that's all for this episode. Thanks for meeting, Nimita, and to our audience, thanks for tuning in to our week's episode.
Thanks for tuning in to Spark After Hours. If you like this episode, consider following us on Spotify and Instagram at Spark Hacks. Thank you for listening and have a wonderful day.